A moment to come in as I set this up a little inverted or not correctly. So I use Restream to be able to set up these live calls, but I actually had made the LinkedIn Live link that many of you registered for before I actually created the event in Restream. So I'm going to give people a moment because the reality is I should have done that backwards. You actually create the live event in Restream, go live, and it automatically brings you live in LinkedIn. So there's going to be some people that actually are registered that don't know that I've just gone live. So with that, in a second, I will actually go live, talk about the time vampires. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up like the situation, the challenge, the resolution, and then show you some examples of being a time vampire and how it's absolutely killing your ability to open new doors and prospect as a BDR team or account executives, or even your customer success team, being able to upsell and cross-sell because they're just not given enough time in a day and enough allotment to be able to time manage properly, to separate the realities of what should be $5 an hour tasks and $500 an hour value creation that gets all kind of mixed up. So I'm going to give everybody a second to come in, and then I'm going to start. We should have 81 attendees coming in, so I'm going to watch people come in and looking at the clock as people are coming in. Let's get kicked off. Let me kind of frame the big problem. The big problem in the situation is this. As an average seller, if you look at your sales organization, you look at what needs to be accomplished in a week. When you hire a sales team, you create job descriptions filled with, of course, commission plans and outcomes. Like, I need you to book so many meetings. I need you to have so many opportunities in your pipeline coverage, and you need to win so much business. That is a lagging indicator. But the leading indicator are the actions and activities you take to get you there. Now, when you created job descriptions, you talked about a role in the blanket sales skills, capabilities, actions, and activities that a BDR or an account executive or a customer success or support person needs to do. The challenge is many organizations have been porting over all those tasks in a list. I'll give you an example. You give somebody the role of account executive. Their job is to figure out, well, what are all the accounts in my territory? And my territory might be geographic, it might be verticalized, it might be a set of named accounts. Great. Well, here's the 100 or 500 accounts I need to go after. What are the key contacts and stakeholders that are within those accounts? Who do we know? Who do we not know? Who do we need to get to know? What intelligence do I need to glean about these accounts? How do I enrich my environment so that I'm making informed decisions as I'm about to engage those prospects? Like, these are some of the fundamental things that an account executive and or a BDR gets prepared before they start prospecting and engaging. And then they need to go through the act of prospecting. And again, as part of job descriptions, you told your sellers to be sellers. Just go get me revenue. That's the lagging indicator. So the problem is you want the outcomes, but it drives you crazy that your sellers are doing the tasks, the actions and activities you know are necessary to get you the deal, but it seems like a giant waste of time that your sellers are actually doing some of these tasks. That in lies the problem. The problem is that because sales has all these tasks and actions and activities, we just assume that's part of the job. That's part and parcel to what you need to do to be able to drive opportunity. But the older I get, and the more I've spent my career in enablement of sales professionals, I've come to realize that there was, at that time, two paths, right? If you want to improve the yield and throughput of a seller, you did one of two things. You looked at what they were doing manually and you gave them a tool. And the purpose of the tool was to uplift the yields per seller to make them more productive. Or number two, you enabled them to do things better, smarter, so that, again, you would increase the yield per seller. But I've come to recognize there's a third category. And that third category is the time vampire. That third category is recognizing that not everything that we do in a day is that valuable. And in fact, there's about 20% on average, Gartner and Serious Decisions, these companies have studied time management for sellers. About 20% of a seller's week is doing administrivia. And in a moment, I'm going to show you real life examples of what you've asked your sales team to do, because it's just part of sales, but in reality, it's not that valuable. It is valuable to the outcome that it will eventually achieve, but you can get those tasks done and still achieve the outcome. Like, you don't need the $150,000 seller to do the $5 an hour task. And if you allow that $150,000 a year seller to just bounce from more live calls to more customer conversations to more proposals, you'll obviously get more yield and throughput. It's a different way, a different reframe of getting there. Is you have tools that can accelerate a seller, you have enablement that can accelerate a seller, and you have time. If you give somebody more hours in the day, they can have more customer conversations. That leads to more proposals, and then thus that leads to more sales. So let me show you examples of major time vampires and this is what my ask as you go back to your sales organizations. I want you to go into the sales organization and look at the sellers and how they're spending their time. And I'll bet you there's some of these tasks that they're doing. So I'm going to share my screen. As I share my screen, I'm going to show you sample task number one. Sample task number one, total addressable market mapping. You have given every account executive this job since the history of time. Here is a portfolio of accounts. Here is a geographic market. Here is a vertical. And you want to know who are all the companies, who are all the key contacts, what are their LinkedIn profiles, what are their email addresses. Eventually, you'll enrich them with phone numbers. All of this information needs to go into the CRM. Yeah, you're probably saying to yourself, yeah, but we've got like a Zoom info. Somebody has to actually go into Zoom info, put it into HubSpot and Salesforce. Somebody then has to go through and ensure that it's truly hit the entire buying committee. The decision makers, champions, the influencers, they all have to be in there. Then you've got to double check that all that information is correct, that you have updated email addresses, you have updated LinkedIn URLs, you are mapping it for all the job changes. Remember, 3% of a database decays every month. So who's doing all this? This is an example of a time vampire. You give a seller a grouping of accounts. Here is Yeti. I want you to go after this beautiful water bottle company, and I want you to go after every other water bottle manufacturer in the world, Stanley and all those other companies that people are drinking water out of now. So you've given that as the task. You've asked your sellers, find me every water bottle company, find me all the chief financial officers, VP of finance, head of operations, head of supply chain management. I need to know all those players. I need to know that in a database. I need to know who we don't know, who do we need to get to know. This task is given all the time. And this is an example of customers backing up and saying, hold on a second. And I'm going to come back to a really important point. Tools enable sellers to become more productive through yield and throughput. The problem, though, is there are a myriad of sales tools, AI new tools. The average sales organization has up to 23 or more of these tools per seller. And so you're asking a seller to master Apollo and Zoom Info and Salesforce and HubSpot and Marketo and Reggie.ai and Copy.ai and SalesLoft and Clay.com. And they spend most of their day trying to master the tools and not actually doing the output. So task number one, total addressable market mapping, database enrichment, contact verification, getting that in a place. That's a $5 an hour task. To which point the seller, the $500 an hour value creator, can just start and have conversations and have articulate conversations with a customer to say, hey, I noticed that Sam didn't show up to the call today. Any reason? This is a qualifying question. Any reason that Sam didn't show up to the call today? And where would he be in the process of helping us with this journey? The seller was well informed that Sam is part of the buying committee, that Sam didn't show up to the call, and that is a potential red flag if you use Medic or BANT, that the decision makers, champions, and influencers didn't show up to the call. That's a $500 an hour value creation that the seller knew that. But the ask of building the database, that's a $5 an hour task. So that's sample number one. I'm going to show you sample number two. Sample number two is, we know, and I'll actually kind of stop sharing for a second and I'll reframe here. Sample number two, prospecting on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an incredible source of opening doors. The challenge, though, is it's laborious, time-consuming, very mechanical, very much like emailing at subscale. Now, a lot of you might be emailing using SalesLoft and Outreach, and you might have some sort of automated tools doing this, but you've probably been noticing as well, you've been having domain issues, email bounce backs, your email's been blacklisted, and you've almost had to revert back to a subscale world. Now you want to prospect on LinkedIn. And I'm going to share my screen. The outcome of prospecting on LinkedIn is $500 an hour value creation. The problem is the act of the prospecting itself. Yet you can have a teammate actually buy back your time, create your campaigns. We use a tool called Expandy, and it allows us to create campaigns, turn them on and off. You can see these are just, some are tests, some are real. This LinkedIn event, you can invite people to a LinkedIn event, drive people to those events, and create outcomes to which you are no longer doing the $5 an hour task. You're getting $500 an hour value creation. Driving 81 people to this event. A couple of weeks ago, I did a live event in Salt Lake City, drove 31 founders into a room. We had dinner together, won 3 customers out of it. How did that happen? We are engaging those founders on LinkedIn. How do you do that at scale? You buy back the task from myself, from the seller. So now I have the output of prospecting on LinkedIn, any type of campaign, first degree connections, second degree connections, live events. But at the same time, I don't have to worry about sitting in front of my computer and engaging these 50 water bottle companies on LinkedIn. That database can be built. We can build the cadence and sequence of messaging that go to that water bottle company. We can engage that water bottle company, booking meetings with the executives. I get the $500 an hour outcome and not have to spend the $5 an hour task to do that. Okay, I'm going to show you one more as we are about to wrap up here in a moment. The third example is content. So content, I'm going to talk to you about the problem. The problem is, if you really want to become a magnet and draw people towards yourself, you have to be able to master content. Making videos as an example, as you know, I love to do that, or writing newsletters or blogs. Now, if you ask somebody to completely ghost that process, usually that voice doesn't come out as yourself, and it falls on deaf ears. It doesn't come out the way that you want. But what if you want to be able to create newsletters at scale? You want to be able to create blogs at scale. I want you to master a process, and thinking about a $5 an hour task. What if you wanted to create these newsletters, share them on LinkedIn, draw people towards yourself as an inbound lead flow? At the end of every newsletter has calls to action to which people can download things. Again, these can also sit at the LinkedIn level. And as you can see, at the LinkedIn level, sharing newsletters. How does this happen? Well, it's a concept called, like, think of planes, trains, and automobiles. what I want you to picture, I call it window time. The way that window time works is you actually jump on a call with a copywriter who you speak the newsletter. So every one of these newsletters are spoken from my actual voice, from my lips to God's ears. I am actually talking through all these ideas. That call's recorded. If you use Zoom as an example, it's got AI companion. It goes speech to text. The copywriter cleans up the language, adds some images, turns this into an article within 24 hours. And all of a sudden, you've taken your intellectual capital, your voice, the way that you describe things, and turns it into an outcome that has calls to action. It has the ability to book you meetings. I'm just kind of showing you like as downloadable calls to action. Everything you need to drive content into the market. And all you needed to do was grab a microphone and talk for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, you can come up with a blog article. In 10 minutes, you can write an entire newsletter that has multiple articles within it. And so these are just small examples of the difference between the outcome. The outcome is you would love to have articles going out every day or every week, newsletters. But you don't have the time to actually take your fingers and write 1,000 words, which can take hours. But you can talk it in 5 minutes. And you have a copywriter on the back end taking notes of what you're saying and turning it into magic. These are all examples of the difference of looking constructively at what us in sales do and saying to ourselves, hold on, we want more meetings, we want more proposals, we want more deals. Here are the tasks, breaking them down into 2 ledgers. And there's a free resource I'd highly recommend. Let me share my screen again. There's a free resource I highly recommend you look at. And if you go to free resources, and I'll put this in the chat for you, there's a free resource called Centralizing Support Benchmarking. And the concept here is to subdivide your day with a sheet of paper with 2 columns. On the left-hand side, it says $5 an hour tasks. On the right-hand side, it says $500 an hour value creation. And you back up. And every time you do something in a day, you become really objective about what you just did and say, was that really a $5 an hour task, or was that $500 an outcome? Did I check my emails? $5 an hour task. Did I check my WhatsApp? $5 an hour task. Did I just enrich a spreadsheet? Because it only takes me 7 minutes. That's a $5 an hour task. You start adding those up and you start to recognize that there are details that can buy back your time. And things like content creation are super valuable. The output of putting this out in the world is worth $500 an hour. But you can, as an example, write these articles with a partner, and it's a $5 an hour task because somebody's actually taken the act of typing away from you and you just focused on the intellectual property. So I'll kind of put that in the chat for everybody on free resources, but I hope you found this of value. What I wanted to demonstrate to everybody, and I maybe there is not a chat, I'll just put it in the posting as this goes live. I want everybody to realize that not everything you do in the day is super valuable from your time management, but it are important tasks that need to get done to you to progress as a sales professional, as a sales leader, as a founder doing founder-led sales. But if you paused and bucketed these things into $5 an hour tasks, $500 an hour value creation, you'd realize that there's all kinds of support, and I'm a huge fan of offshore support, sales and marketing support, that could take these off your plate so you can do more of these sort of things. So I hope you found this of value. I'm going to be doing a webinar showing best practices every month, but this is an example of 3 different tasks that you need to do. You need to enrich databases. You need to prospect on LinkedIn. You need to create content. But there's a faster and simpler way to do it and way more cost effective. So I hope this helps.